Welcome into another edition of the FutureSox RoundUp. My name is Elijah Evans, joined today by both of my co-hosts, Jeff Cohen and Dylan Barnas. We're back with the trio. We're going to try and do these every few weeks. It's going to be fun to get all three of us in here and just chop it up a little. And today we are at the end of single A and high A baseball season. It's pretty crazy. It came around the corner quickly, and Kannapolis and Winston-Salem finished up their season a couple days ago. We're recording here on Wednesday the 10th. We're going to just recap all of single A and single A and high A season this year, and just look at the highlights and everything that happened within the White Sox organization at the lower levels of the minor leagues. So, welcome in, guys. Jeff, what's going on?
Hey, Elijah, Dylan, good to see you guys. Just getting used to no baseball in Kannapolis and Winston-Salem. Always a
Yeah,
bit of a shock to the system, but
yeah, it comes out of nowhere.
yeah.
Dylan, what's
Yeah,
going on,
I
man?
I had a great weekend. Mizzou beat Kansas in the border war. That was the only win I wanted on the college football schedule this year. But yeah, Kannapolis and Winston, they didn't have the best season in terms of record wise, which we'll get into later. But like there were a lot of solid players, especially in Kannapolis, and then later getting bumped up into Winston. That like they're gonna be. They have a chance to be key pieces in the White Sox future here in 2-3 years, in some cases sooner for some of the older college guys.
Yeah, 100%. It's going to be fun to look at. I think we saw some really good growth from some players at those levels. We saw a lot of players in single A and high A end up moving up the ranks this season, which is always great to see. Before we dive in fully, we're going to start with Kannapolis, then we're going to get into Winston, kind of move upwards. Next week, we'll talk more Birmingham and Charlotte. Birmingham is starting the AA playoffs next Tuesday. So hopefully we'll have a little bit of preview of the playoffs and then potentially recap it after that. Before we get into both the season in review of Kannapolis and of Winston, just some White Sox news. Where are we at? How are we feeling right now? I mean, I feel pretty positive about everything that's gone on in the past handful of weeks, and generally the second half in general. I think that the White Sox have shown enough to believe that they're in the right direction, and that's not saying that there is a massive jump that has been taken. That's not to say that we feel amazing about everything, but I think that the second half has really showed us a lot of positive notes of where the team is at. I mean, the White Sox are 23 and 25 in the second half of the season at this point. They would be 4.5 games back of the division in the AL Central if we were looking purely at the second half of the season. If you told me they'd be 4.5 games of every other team in the Central in half of a season, I'd feel really, really good about that. And that comes along with the fact that you've seen massive, first seasons from Colson Montgomery, from Kyle Teal, from Edgar Caro, from Chase Mydroth, from, even, big steps forward from Miguel Vargas, from Lenine Sosa. Where are we at just feeling with, the White Sox progress as we're, 3 weeks away from the end of the baseball season right now for the Sox?
I think that, we said it at the beginning of the year, and it's sort of proving true now. Like, the team that started the year in Chicago is not going to look like the team that finishes the year in Chicago. And I mean, it really doesn't. I mean, I think of the starting lineup right now, Colson Montgomery, Kyle Teal, Edgar Caro, Chase Mydroth, none of those guys were in the opening day lineup. And I think it just goes to show how vital those guys are to a winning White Sox team. Because when those four are on, like, you really can't get that middle group of the order. It's a really tough out. And to say that like less than a year removed from losing 121 games, that's just a fantastic step in the right direction. And they might avoid 100 losses. It would be great if they were able to improve by over 20 wins, but I genuinely don't think that record matters, especially given the fact that you're 23 and 25 in the second half. And you've got guys like Colson Montgomery where they were awful in AAA to start the year, and now he hit the most homers in a shortstop's first career. It was like 48 games in MLB history. Like that, it's just nuts, man. And I really hope that some of these rookies who are having solid seasons right now can roll it over and improve into next year. Because if that happens, man, this team is going to be really fun really quickly.
Yeah, I've got to. I want to tip my hat to the Chris Getson company. I have been very complimentary about the way the player development guys, Paul Janish and company, have been boldly moving guys through the system when they deserve promotions, and they embraced the young guys and they brought them all up to Chicago, and slowly but surely kept getting rid of the veterans to make room for the young guys. So I applaud that.
Yeah, it's hard not to be excited. I think that there's still a lot of ways to go, and I still have some things I really want to see get done this offseason. And as we
Yeah.
finish the minor league season, we're definitely going to dive fully into offseason content here in October when other teams are playing in the playoffs. But at the same time, I think that there's a lot to be excited about, especially the last month. You look at this team, especially on the offensive side, particularly. I think the pitching, it's easy to look at and say, oh, the White Sox are, they're still getting beat up on and pitching side a lot of the times. And like, sure, how many guys on this roster right now are actually part of the future? Not a ton. There's not a ton. I think there's maybe 5, maybe 6.
Right.
There's not a ton of pitchers. So I think you've got a lot of guys filling innings right now in place of young pitchers who will be on the roster. You're going to have 8, 9 rookie pitchers on this roster next year, whether between the bullpen and the rotation by the middle of the season. I don't think that might seem a little drastic, but I really don't think it is when you factor in, at least a couple of the rotation spots being young guys, a good amount of the bullpen guys, some of potential starters shifting into bullpen roles, some of those younger guys, right? So there's going to be a really young pitching staff. And then you look at the offense, just the last month, right? Kyle Teal, 976 OPS has been ridiculous. Mydroth, 793. Edgar Caro, 824. Colson Montgomery, 820. And, even Brooks Baldwin, 775 OPS. Miguel Vargas, 804 OPS. That's just in the past month, right? And yeah, that's a small sample, but we've seen this for almost 2 months now from a lot of these young guys that have taken a big step forward. So I think you got to feel pretty good about just where the team stands. And these next couple of weeks, let's not win it. Let's lose less than 100 games. That'd be awesome.
Right.
I mean, all the team's got to do is win another. They got to go about 500 here down the stretch, even a little less than 500. A game under 500, and this team is below a 100 loss team. I think there's complete reason to believe that the White Sox can go 500 down the stretch here, and they can finish out this year being a 98 loss team. Which, yeah, that sounds ugly. Still, I get it. A couple of years ago, we look at this team and you're at the looking at this core, and you say to yourself, oh, like 199, 98 losses, that sucks, and it's not fun. But a 22 win improvement is probably going to be one of the best, if not the best, in Major League Baseball. So when you look at it that way, you got to feel pretty good about that, I think.
Yeah, I don't think that anybody coming into this year was expecting the White Sox to be like ultra competitive, but like in the second half they kind of are, man. Like there's been a lot of games, especially recently, where they've come back from trailing early. I think it was out of the 7 wins out of 8 games, they trailed in all 7 of them and then came back to win all of them. And like that didn't happen last year. And it's nice to see that once they go down, they don't just immediately roll over and die like we saw last year and even the year before. Like the team actually like wants to win. And, for a team that's likely going to lose 100 to 98 games, that's pretty good, especially from rookies who like they're not in contention for any awards. They're not trying to boost their stats. Like, no, these guys are just going out there and trying to win games. And I think that's all you can ask for from a group of guys who, at the end of the day, they're going to be the next guys to take the White Sox to the playoffs, to the World Series, wherever. Like, this is a good group of guys.
And I would contend that this young core that they put together, they're creating a winning culture. And I think that started in Birmingham, right, with those successful Birmingham teams that they were on. And in Birmingham and up through the system into Chicago, I think they support each other, they hold each other accountable, and there's an expectation that they're going to win, and they're trying to play winning baseball. I think that winning culture is important.
I think you're feeling it. I think that's a great thing to be just sensing throughout the organization. I'm totally with you there, Jeff. I think that it starts from top down. I think there's a lot of that being shown and preached from Chris Getz, from Brian Bannister, from Ryan Fuller, from everybody else that's involved in the top of the organization. And I think that you're seeing it with a lot of the younger generation of coaches, of players. We're going to talk about 2 teams today with Winston and Kannapolis, who are both led by very young managers who have baseball in their blood, from either playing or having, family in the game, all this stuff, right? And these teams are seeing a lot of success and a lot of, maybe not the best records, but hard playing. They're striving to win. Yeah, when we talk to any of these players, when Jeff talks to them in person, when I'm talking to guys in interviews, like you sense the energy. The energy is competitive right now in the organization, from the minor leagues up to the big leagues, right? Like the young guys want to win and they want to all be part of that winning culture. I'm not a huge expected record guy, guys, but like at the same time, like 64-81 expected record for the White Sox. When you look at it, right, that's 9 wins, even more, 9 more wins than they have right now for a team that has lost a bunch of random fluky late games because of bullpen blowups, frankly, right? Like you take away the bullpen blowups and you got another 10 wins on this team, and you've got a team that's, as good, if not better than the Twins in their own division, right? I think the Sox at this point have played much better baseball since the deadline for sure than the Twins who blew it up. So I think you're in a better position than the Twins. I think Cleveland's still in a very finicky position going into next year. I think they're playing decent ball lately, especially. I still think they're in a spot where they're not feeling super excited about their path right now. Detroit's a different story. I think they're going to be the cream of the crop for the Central for quite some time right now, the way they're set up. Kansas City still is in a better direction, but not necessarily a super great one. I think they're in a pretty good spot, but I don't think it's crazy to say the White Sox are in the third best spot already in this division and could push to be, in the second best position, not the second best team, but the second best organizational position in the AL Central come mid next season.
Absolutely. And especially because, the Twins, not only did they blow it up, they're probably not going to add much payroll because, Justin Ishbia, I get them mixed up all the time. Ishbia, thank you. He wanted to buy the Twins, and then he saw how deeply in debt they were, and he was like, I'm good. I'll pass. So I don't think that they're going to be adding payroll anytime soon. And their farm system is solid, but there's a lot of guys that are far away. And I just really don't see them finishing above fourth in the AL Central for the next 3-ish years. It's going to be rough in Minnesota. And I just hope that the White Sox can rise above the Royals and the Guardians because those teams are solid. They're perfectly average teams in my opinion, but we saw what the Guardians can do. They can win baseball games out of thin air. That's just the way that they play baseball. But the White Sox can compete with them. There's been many games this year where I've seen the White Sox play the Guardians, and I'm like, how is this team 30 wins better than the White Sox? It really doesn't make any sense. But I'm really looking forward to next year, but also just finishing out this year strong. Like I said, record doesn't matter. Just finishing this year strong and just laying a foundation going into next year.
Yeah.
Well, as we're looking forward to next year, I think one of the things that you and I have talked about, Elijah, is the free agent acquisitions in the offseason.
Yeah.
That's going to be a big factor. One of the positions that you have been pushing for is to pick up one of these many closers that are available. And we've in the last couple of years, the White Sox have led the leagues and in fact set records in blowing saves. So if they can add one of these elite closers in the offseason, that could really be an extra 10 wins next year on the record. That's not an understatement.
It definitely could be. And then you see another step taken from Grant Taylor, who, as he gets more comfortable, and then you've got potentially a really nice duo back there, right? So you've already seen some steps taken from some of the guys this year too. So there's a lot to look forward to. I think there's a lot to be excited about. Before we can kind of get fully geared up for next season, we got to look at what we've got in the farm right now, though. Before we dive into Kannapolis, quick notes. Braden Montgomery hits the IL. Unfortunately, it sounds like there's a fracture for him in his foot. Interesting to see kind of how the timeline looks for Beaumont there. It sounds like he's going to miss the rest of the Birmingham season, but the hope is that he will still participate in the Arizona Fall League, which kicks off in about a month from now in Arizona. It sucks. It's been a very, very fun last few months for Braden Montgomery. It's been awesome to see him kind of find his groove in AA. He's definitely found it the past month or so. We've seen a lot of strides taken forward from him. We're going to talk about him a little later, but we've seen him from Kannapolis to Winston up to Birmingham, and obviously a huge piece of the future. You're hoping that sometime mid to late next season, he's starting in the outfield for the White Sox, whether it's in place of Benintendi or Mike Tauchman, however that goes down. He's going to be in the outfield by the end of next season, hopefully. Another guy, Noah Schultz, hits the IL again with the knee injury that's been bothering him. That came back from, but he's now out again. Sounds like he may not be participating in the Arizona Fall League, just because he isn't participating in the Arizona Fall League because of the knee injury. It sucks. I mean, it's always going to be a little freaky being a 6'10" lefty with super lanky and has all that just body. But it's a bummer, right? I think we were hoping that Noah Schultz was going to be pushing to be in the Chicago at the beginning of next season, and now you're in a situation where he misses the end of this year. He doesn't quite get to the inning. He didn't get nearly the innings you were hoping he was going to get this season. The hope was he was going to build up some more innings in Arizona. Now you're in a spot where he goes into the offseason being a little lagged in innings. Even if he gets the bigs next year, he definitely would be on an innings limit. It's a bummer for sure. I think this has been a tough year for Schultz in multiple different ways, from injury to dealing with AAA to making those adjustments to tweaking his arsenal. Like, there's just been constant adjustment for Schultz this year. So both these guys, like, I just hope that they can get right as soon as possible, and get them into a situation where you can have a primarily full, healthy offseason for both of them.
Yeah, and with both of them, I'm really not too worried about like the injuries themselves, because Schultz, I'm just glad that he's avoided arm injuries. Like that was the big thing for me coming into this year, was like, how is the arm going to hold up over an extended period of time? And like you said, he didn't get the innings that we were hoping coming into the year, but like I think he got to what, in 88 innings on
Yeah,
the
80
year,
something, yeah.
around 90. So like that's pretty good. And with Braden, it's just another freak injury. Like the fracture in his foot that he just got, it was off a hit by pitch. Like you can't really, like, you can't avoid that. And then like in college where he broke his leg sliding into home, like again, you can't really avoid that. So it's not like it's like soft tissue injuries where, they're obviously just like not stretching or not doing proper warm ups, warm down, everything like that. It's just freak injuries, and like I said, I'm not worried about the overall health of these guys going forward, because at the end of the day, these guys are healthy, or they were healthy, and it's just sort of like small one-off stuff, which I'm not gonna say that like patellar tendonitis for Schultz is a small thing, but it's not so much of a huge worry in my mind where I'm like, all right, this guy needs to get healthy before I can think about putting him in the 2026 White Sox plans. So that's where I'm
Yeah.
kind of at.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have seen him, add another 25 innings, and but with Braden, he had a great year. It's unfortunate, but doesn't do anything to slow down his his
Yeah.
rapid rise.
Yeah, I'm with you guys there. All right, well, let's get into it. Let's get into single A and high A season in reviews here. We'll have some more information, of course, on Kannapolis and Winston down the road, but just our first kind of look at the season as a whole right now that it wrapped up a few days ago. Starting in Kannapolis, the Cannonballers go 64-68. Chad Pinder's first year as the manager, new regime, kind of new vibes there. A few holdovers from last year, but largely a very new roster, as is typical at the single A level, where guys come in, guys come out. There's tons of movement throughout the year. Dylan, start us off with some of the guys who just kind of, early in the season were kind of those initial forces for the Cannonballers out of the gate.
I mean, initially you have to talk about Braden Montgomery. I think he spent like 17 games down there. It was short, but I mean, he looked like a man among boys, and then got the promotion to Winston. We'll talk about him in Winston later, but like he was clearly the best player on the field for those 3-ish weeks that he was down there. But then after he left, Caleb Bonner sort of took his role as being like the blue chip guy on the field, and he sort of ran with it until he got promoted to Winston a couple weeks ago now. And I mean, Caleb Bonner just sort of blew, in my mind, everybody's expectations of him out of the water. Like, he's a clear top 5 prospect in the White Sox system now. And I in honesty, I was probably a little bit lower on him coming into the year. I think I had him ranked like 13th in the White Sox system. And to be fair, there were graduations ahead of him. So if I think it was Teal, Caro, and anyways, he rose due to graduations and his on-field performance. But like, I mean, those two in my mind were the two best White Sox hitting prospects all year, and to have both of them in the same lineup in Kannapolis for even just the 3 weeks that Braden was down there was really fun to watch.
Yeah, that was a blast, Jeff. I know you got a couple games of him, and obviously you saw him in both Kannapolis and then Winston. What was the initial just Braden Montgomery buzz to start the year in Kannapolis?
Well, I tell you, I like his confidence. He's a confident player, and he backs it up. And yeah, he was real impressive right out of the gate. You're right; he was here for 18 games, and off he went. And He was impressive, but we also and Caleb was impressive, and the second half that Caleb had was just off the charts. Just like Chad Pender told me, I said, "What's the benefit in him going to Winston Salem for 2 weeks?" And he goes, "He earned that promotion."
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I think the biggest like thing you can take away from Kannapolis this season was Bonner. I don't think there's anybody that, Braden Montgomery, like we expected him to dominate single A, like he was an SEC top 10, top 5 player in college baseball last season, right? Like Bonner is the one where it's like you see these high school guys, they get their first experience and their first taste of affiliated ball, and you hope it goes well, and sometimes it does, and sometimes it really doesn't. And even when it does go well, it doesn't usually go this well. And then that's where I think the takeaway with Bonner is just that you see a guy who took his stock from second round pick who got an overslot in the draft to now a player that is legitimately a consensus top 100 prospect in baseball. Those are the jumps you have to make. And those are the jumps we're going to have to continue to see within the organization to feel confident about the future moving forward. And just to look at a guy who it was supposed to be power over hit. And you saw a guy with one of the best hit tools in the single A level this season. He's patient. He has a good plate approach. He takes his pitches. He jumps on the fastball when he can. You're seeing the power come, and the power is going to be there for sure. Led the Carolina League in doubles this season. It was such an impressive year from him all around. On top of the fact that it was his, he was playing shortstop and playing it at a pretty good level. Yeah, he played some third base, and I still think he's going to play some of both going forward. But you saw a guy who was kind of labeled as this, like he's not going to play shortstop, and now he's playing shortstop in high A right now and doing a pretty good job of it. So you got to feel amazing about Caleb Bonner's just season as a whole and just the development of what he did this season in Kannapolis, and then now getting to Winston at the end of the year.
Yeah,
Going from there,
I was gonna transition into another prep. He was kind of a prep pick. He was a JUCO pick in 2023. Christian Opper started the year in Kannapolis and just tore it up. In my mind, he was going to spend all of 2025 in Kannapolis, but then looking at his numbers in 22 and a third innings in Kannapolis, a 2.42 ERA, striking out 39.5% of batters while only walking 8.1%. And I mean, if that doesn't earn you a promotion, I don't know what will. Like, he tore it up in Kannapolis to start the year, and then really just continued his dominance after a few rough adjustment period weeks in Winston. But like, Christian Opper, is he the biggest riser among White Sox pitchers in the system?
You got the other guy too.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's hard. I think you could make a very good case for Opera or Tanner McDougal, who we'll get to when we talk about Winston. Both those guys go from out of the top 30 to top 10 in the system. So I think that it's a clear 1A, 1B, however you want to stack it between those two, right?
Well, and I will say, I talked to Christian a lot this year. He's a really approachable guy, really friendly. So I talked to him after like 3 or 4 starts. And what my biggest takeaway from my conversations with him is he really is just scratching the surface, because I talked to him after he faced the Carolina Mudcats, which was the best hitting team in low A. And he said, "Man, I really had to pitch tonight." And, I talked to him, and when he was in Winston-Salem after a start, and he said, "Yeah, I've really got to learn, you know, about sequencing, and which to me is the nuts and bolts of pitching. That he was so good in low A, he could just throw whatever pitch he wanted at any time and kind of breeze through it. He's just now learning how to pitch, and he's just going to get that much better."
Yeah, that's what stands out with me with Opera, and that's why I think you saw the flashes in Kannapolis, and you saw the pure skill that shined very quickly immediately this season. But then when you saw him make that jump to high A, have a couple games where he was like, okay, let's adjust and let's figure it out from there, and then he did that. And that's what's so exciting about Opera is that I think you nailed it right there, Jeff. Like it took all of last season. So I was just on the press conference with him last week after he won August Pitcher of the Month for the organization. And one of the things he said that really resonated with me is he was like, I spent all of last year just playing with pitch grips, changing my body, getting stronger, moving the way. I mean, they basically stripped down his pitching from the ground down because he was a junior college guy. They loved the stuff and the rawness of his talent and the arm talent because it was there. And the White Sox basically just turned him into an entire year-long project in 2024 and went into this season being really excited about him. When I talked to him in spring training, like he was like, yeah, I feel better than I've ever felt. I feel like I'm a different pitcher. that showed immediately this season. And those are the types of developments, the oppers, the bottomers, right? Those ones, but opper especially, guys that are, really, you got to kind of rework a lot of things there. And now you see him in his first full season, just looking like an absolute stud. Like, I think if Bottomer is the number one, like, development guy to look from in Kannapolis, even though Opper was only there for a handful of games, that's the other one I think you got to circle after that.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And like the thing that jumps out to me is Opper's velo jumps. Like he was a guy who was sitting like 94 last year, and even in his junior college years, he topped 100 this year. Like that doesn't happen in like
Yeah.
overnight. And I think it just goes back to him working on his body and working on his mechanics last year. And at the end of last year, I was a bit bummed because I liked him. I was mad that we didn't get to see him in Kannapolis last year. But now knowing what I know, being like, all right, he was taking that entire year just to get right and become an actual pitcher instead of just a thrower. Like that, I would easily do that trade any day of the week, and I'm really excited to see Opper just continue to grow, and especially after a season like this, you have an off season to just build on that and then go into 2026 where, all right, this is the floor. I keep on saying this, like this is the floor, and then you just build off of that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with
So
you.
I think the other big story, I'm curious, I think the other big story in Kannapolis is the progress of George Wolkow. And how do you guys assess his season?
Take it away, Dell.
I think we've said it, I feel like countless times on this show where like if you told me George Walkow's strikeout rate, hold on, let me pull it up right now. But I know that it was down like below 30% for a better portion of the year. And it crept back up to 29.6 over the course of the full year. But there was a point in time where his strikeout rate was hovering around 25%. And like if you told me that George Walkow's strikeout rate was a quarter, I would have thought that he was a blue chip prospect and he was tearing covers off the baseball, and we were looking at left-handed Aaron Judge like everybody hopes for him. But there were just times where I feel like he was getting too much into that contact oriented bat where he was just not leaning into the power as much and just putting good swings on the ball and just trying to go the other way a bit more. Which yes, that's good. And for him to become an all-around hitter and being able to develop into that blue chip guy, he's going to need to do that. But at the same time, like you're 6'8", 240 pounds. Let's lean into the home run power a bit. And I mean, he only hit what? I want to say he hit
15 maybe?
he hit
Yeah,
13
13,
homers.
13. But
13 homers.
yeah, I'm with you there. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how George Walkout comes out next year.
Yeah.
And that's something I'm going to be keyed in on, because this was a guy who, going into the year, he was the most exciting player in Kannapolis, right? We were looking at him coming off of last year like, hey, this is a guy who could, become a top 5, top 10 prospect in the system, depending on how this year goes. And last season, in 76 games in single A, it was a 123 WRC plus. It was a slug of 428, right? So you saw those elements. Yeah, the strikeout rate was incredibly high, but you saw the power and you saw him just the mass raw ability he had. This season, yeah, it was a more well-rounded season. So there's a lot of things to take away there. 33 stolen bases from George Walkout this season with only 6 caught stealing. Really impressive to see the base runner he became this year from a guy who's 6'7". That's pretty insane to see him stealing 33 bags. But then it comes with, in way 40 more games, only 2 more home runs. You're hoping that would have ticked up to, I was thinking he was going to hit 20 plus this year, right? Yeah. And you're seeing him, a lower strikeout rate, sure, but he got a little less, aggressive. He punished the ball a little bit less often. The ground ball rate went up a little bit this year. You're seeing a little bit less, line drive ability. Last season, you had a 26.5% line drive rate. This season, only at a 19% in single A compared to where he was at. So there's still a ton to be excited about here from Walkow, but it definitely, I can't say it was a big step forward. I think it was a step diagonally forward, maybe like 2 steps forward, 1 back, because there was some things that came back. But I do think the base running element, the ability to minimize the whiff there and the strikeout, right? Those are 2 huge steps forward. And now you just have to find a way to reincorporate the raw and exciting power that he possesses.
I can't quantify it, but I've said many times that the at bats just look more competitive. He's not totally at a, when he gets two strikes. He told me, he said, last year I got two strikes, they threw me a breaking ball, I was back in the dugout. It was more competitive this year. The other thing about George is he's a really hard worker in the off season, and so I'm really anxious to see what he looks like in spring training next year and what progress he has continued to make. Just because the season ends doesn't mean these guys stop working. So I'm curious to see the version of George next March.
And he's still really young too. Like this is a 19-year-old in his second professional season of baseball. And yeah, we would have liked to see him take that extra step this year, but it's sort of similar to the Christian Opera thing where, if they just told him this year like, all right, we're just going to have you sell out for contact and we don't want to see you hitting 470-foot moonshot homers and then striking out the other four at bats of the game. Like if they just told him, all right, we're going to focus this year on building the contact skills, I'm fine with that because, like I said, he's 19 years old, and to be 20 years old, probably going to high A next year, I could maybe see him staying back to start the year, but like there's a foundation that has been built for Walkow, and it's a different player than what we saw in 2024 and even when he was drafted. So like there's a lot of positives there that if he can just incorporate the power, I think he's going to be pretty good.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm very curious to see the approach next year because I could see a world where you don't want to lean into this too soon because it might be too early to. But I also can imagine a world where him becoming more of a three true outcome guy could make some sense for him going forward, just because it's just an interesting dynamic with Walkout. I think that you could imagine him moving quicker and having a higher chance of being a successful player if he leans into that three true outcome kind of player. But then you're also limiting the upside of a guy who, if everything clicked, could be that star player, right? So it's the trade-off between trying to strive for that upside and trying to make him a successful player one way or another, even if it means getting rid of some of the high ceiling. So interesting to consider. Flipping over to the pitching side for now, we can touch on a couple more hitters later. On the pitching side, who were the guys for you guys this season in Kannapolis that really just stood out and made their mention? I think you got to start with Grant Umberger, right?
Yeah.
I was going to say I'll defer to you, Jeff. You were the one that was seeing them.
Man, I bet I watched him a half dozen times. Talk about a consistent, reliable guy.
Yeah.
He just dominated from start to finish. I mean, you're talking about a guy in low A with an ERA of 2.56. That's insane. A 9-2 record. All his numbers were off the charts. I'm just kind of puzzled why we never got to see him in high A, but
we just did finally.
But I'm wondering, do you think that's just because they needed him to cover innings in Kannapolis? Could it be something so simple?
I kind of do think so. I mean, we got one start from him last week in Winston, which was nice to see, and he had a nice game, one run allowed over 3 2/3 there. But I do think it's sort of just there was somewhat of lack of innings in Kannapolis. I think the expectation and the hope for this team in Canny, and honestly, what probably held Kannapolis back from being a really solid team this year was the fact that a lot of the 2024 draft guys who you expected to make a big impact this year either dealt with injuries or underperformance, right? And that was what was tricky there. Is you had a plethora of these 24 draft guys who you were expecting to be more prominent pieces, and they just weren't really, whether it was injuries or whether it was lack of performing, right? Like you had a lot of guys who I think you were hoping were going to be a piece of that team and just didn't get there, which put Umberger in a position where like he was an undrafted free agent and he's 23 years old. Like this is not a guy you were expecting to be anything really. And now you're in a spot where he's going into high A. He's going to have a rotation spot next year in Winston-Salem. And he's an older prospect. He's an older guy, sure. But he took an opportunity and he ran with it. And then he ended up putting up the best season of any pitcher in that staff.
Yeah, I will say for the staff, I mean, those guys answered the bell. I mean, you got 23 starts from Reyes and Sinibaldi. No, 22 from Sinibaldi, Brizuela 23, 17 for Umberger. I mean, these guys showed up all year long.
Yeah, but those four, like to your point there, so you mentioned Umberger, Luis Reyes, Justin Sinibaldi, who was a 2024 pick, and then Ricardo Brizuela. I didn't see those four being the four primary
No.
starters in Kannapolis, right? Like, I don't think anybody really did, right? I think that you were hoping Luis Reyes would kind of be a piece there after being in the ACL last year. Sinibaldi is a guy who I think we were expecting to be in the rotation. Brazuela, I thought would probably either shift into a bullpen role because of all the other pitchers or move up to Winston. Umberger was not on the radar at all, right? So you're in a situation, I mean, there's a bunch of other guys you were thinking were going to be in this rotation that weren't there, whether it was injuries. I mean, Seth Keener was there for a while, had a really rough season. And then you look at Opper, who obviously was there, but then immediately gets promoted a month later, right? So those were guys that were expected to be big pieces, whether it was, there's plenty of other names as well. But I think that it was interesting to see. And Nick Pinto was another guy. There was some guys from last year's draft class that you were thinking were going to be bigger pieces and then weren't ultimately. So it is interesting to see how that rotation and it just shows to show how much variability there is, especially with pitching at the lower levels, right?
Yeah, you had Mason Moore, Nick Pinto, Blake Larson. I mean, all these guys were hurt.
Right. Larson would have been there without TJ for sure. So, yeah.
But
what do you guys?
Yeah, were there. Umberger was impressive. But what did you guys think about Reyes and Sinibaldi? I think they both had really solid years.
Yeah,
I think with Reyes, I think that this was a perfectly solid year for a 19-year-old. 87 innings, a 4.3 ERA, and he probably got a little bit unlucky too. Like his FIP is below 4, and he's striking out not a crazy amount of batters, but he's also not walking a ton. It's a walk rate under 10%. And I think that like his stuff is pretty good. And I think that if this can be like a Luis Reyes like breakout season next year, I would not be surprised, because I mean the stuff that he has is gonna work. Like I wasn't expecting him to be like a George Kirby walking only 5% of batters, but like for him to have the level of control that he did as a 19-year-old, like yeah, it's in low A, but like it's still a very positive sign for a guy who was throwing in the Arizona backfields less than a year ago. So I was very pleased by Reyes this year. I'm interested to what you saw, Jeff. I don't know if you saw him in person, but like when I was watching on TV, the stuff looked good.
Well, our pal Dan Haloti, the voice of the Ballers, told Elijah and me preseason. He said that's the arm to watch. He's the one who looked most exciting coming out of the gate, and he's got an electric fastball and a great slider. It's a work in progress, but he's got those two really nice pitches, and I think you're right. He could be the next guy to explode and really shoot up the ranks.
Considering he was like the only guy in this, rotation that was even near his current age, right? Like most of this rotation was 22, 23-year-olds, and you've got a 19-year-old Luis Reyes rounding that group out. So, it's not the prettiest season on paper, but I do think it's a very encouraging season from a guy who's 19, and he could easily start next season in Kannapolis still, or you could push him a little aggressively to Winston, and I think he would survive there, right? So for him, he's just going to keep honing in on some things, and I'm really excited to see Luis Reyes next year, because I do think his body has a little more maturing to do still. If you see him kind of just grow a little bit, gain a little muscle, add some strength, like he's one guy we could be looking at next year and saying, hey, this was one of the bigger breakouts this season, just because he built off of it, what he was doing this year. And I think we could see him take a really big step next season. And we cracked our top 30 for the first time a month ago. And I think that he could easily be a top 15, 20 guy next season, depending on how he continues to trend forward. The other guys to note there on the pitching side of things, there's not a ton of note. I think a lot of guys had some ups and downs, had some struggles, but a couple relievers, stood forward. I think Jack Young is one of them, 9th rounder from last year's draft. That's a guy who his first, 19 games he pitched in Kannapolis, and it was a .35 ERA. 1 earned run allowed across 26 innings for Jack Young to start his professional career. Command came and went for a little bit, but he ends up in Winston, where he's had some ups and downs, but has still continued to be a pretty solid pitcher there at the next level. So that's one guy out of the bullpen to mention. And then the other one I would mention is Matthias Lacombe. And that was later in the season, obviously. But Matthias Lacombe, I still don't know if I'm saying it wrong, and I apologize, because I know people are tapped in on him. But I will get that right next year for sure. But his first taste of professional ball after really dominating in the complex league, there were some ups and downs for him. For sure, the command came and went at times, but still, 17 2/3 with 23 strikeouts for Matthias in his first professional, handful of games there with Kannapolis.
Yeah, we were hearing a ton of buzz about him in the Arizona backfields, and he finally got to Kannapolis after a bit of an extended wait in Arizona, at least for me. But he looked really good. It was a lot of breaking balls going one way, sinkers going the other way. And I mean, when you have that type of stuff that Lacombe has, I mean, that's going to work. And what was his ERA on the year? Because how many innings did he even throw in Kannapolis? Because I
I
have
thought
minimum
it was
20
It
innings.
was he threw 17 and 2/3 at a 4.08 ERA. So and
Okay,
that
so
was
yeah,
only one. It was only one outing where he gave up like the large portion of those
yeah.
too. So.
Okay, yeah, and he's striking out essentially 30% of batters. The walk rate is a bit elevated, but again, it's in 17 and 2/3 innings. So I was really impressed by Lacombe this year. So I'm hoping that he can ride this into 2026 and stick as a starter in 26, because that was the thing that I was looking for this year, because like he came into the year like essentially not being known as like a guy in the White Sox system, and then we were starting to hearing buzz about him from guys who were seeing him live in Arizona, and then now he gets to Winston and he gets limited. He's on like the whole 3 inning stint thing, but if he can be a starter next year, like that's going to be big for his development, and I think he could really take off as a starter over a full year.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. I think it's either he or Reyes who is most likely to be the breakout guy next year in Winston.
Yeah, and we shall see. Anything else from the Kannapolis season before we head up to Winston? I know a couple of things. I mean, stolen bases. I know you mentioned that to me, Dylan. Like that
Mhm.
was a huge emphasis. I think it was really cool to see how much this team ran this season, and it seems like it was a very like everybody I've talked to. It sounds like that has been an emphasis from the organization in general. I still think for the White Sox as a whole, like they're not stealing a ton, and I think that there is. I know that there is this excitement around just the aggressiveness of this team right now. I think that everybody's buying into that. And I also see when you look at the big league roster, there's not a ton of guys who have the speed to really steal a bunch. So I
Right.
think that a lot of the guys coming up in the system have this mentality of like, I'm going to get good at stealing bags because we could use that.
Yeah, and it's guys who like they're not expected to steal a ton of bases. Like George Walkout stealing 33 bags
That's
and only getting
insane.
caught 6 times. I don't think anybody on the planet was expecting that. I would have been happy if he stole 15. And like, yeah, he's a quicker guy, but he's a big dude. And for him to get moving that quick and to steal 33 bags is just great.
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
No, I agree. It's a great tool for these guys to have. You know, I just have to temper my expectations a little bit because everybody in low A is stealing
Yeah.
bases. I mean, they had 8 games with over 5 stolen bases, and an incredible. What was the total number on the year? And they weren't even first in the league. I mean, so. But I'm great they're learning that skill. I hope it continues as
Yeah.
in high A and double A.
With you. Last guy to mention here as the season rounded out in Kannapolis before we dive into Winston, Eli Brown. I talked to Eli Brown last week, put up an interview with him, so make sure you go check that one out if you haven't yet. Eli Brown with a really fun start to his professional career. Of the guys who debuted from this current draft class, so the guys that were just drafted about 2 months ago, he's the one that stands out. A lot of other people taking their time. Obviously it takes some time to settle into the professional ranks when you start in professional ball after the draft, but Eli Brown comes out the gate scorching. His first 27 professional games, he hit 317 with a 417 on base percentage, 15 for 15. Speaking of guys that know how to steal bases, not 15 for 15 in 27 games is silly. And then from there, it was just 17 walks to 19 strikeouts. Really fun, start to the professional career for Eli Brown.
I have a very funny stat for you. So in Eli Brown's 92 games at Mercer over the past 2 years, he stole 12 bases and then stole 15 in 27 with Kannapolis. So
All right.
I guess he's a runner now.
Yeah.
Love it. Love to see it. Shall we go to Winston-Salem, finish up the season there?
Yeah.
Where are we starting in Winston? Because I think you can start if we're going to start on the hitting side. So this was to give the grand scope, a 56 and 74 record for Winston in Pat Leland's first year in Winston-Salem. He was the Kannapolis manager in Single A last season. Gets the bump up to High A Winston. The record is misleading in my opinion because the roster at the start of the season was nowhere near the roster later in the season and even middle season, right? Like at the roster beginning of the year, we looked at it and we said, okay, this is going to be one of the weaker teams in the organization. And it was early on. you saw a very different team down the stretch and even in the middle to the second half of the season. You got Christian Opera, who we talked about. You got a bunch of reinforcements, and from Kannapolis. On the hitting side, you got to start with kind of what I would consider the big three who got there and then moved pretty quickly. Braden Montgomery gets to Winston. He plays 69 games in Winston. Sam Antonacci opens the year in Winston. He plays 64 games there. Ryan Galaney only played 21 games there before getting a bump because he was going off. It was only a short period of time, I believe, where they had all three of them. I don't even know if they did, actually. I think Braden might have gotten there right as Galaney. I think Galaney went up to Birmingham right when Braden got there. But generally speaking, two of the three of them were there for whether it was opening the year with Galaney and Antonacci, then it was Braden and Antonacci before all of them are now in Birmingham. What a trio, guys. I mean, that three, what they were doing at that level was so impressive to watch, in their different times at the level.
Yeah. I mean,
yeah. Well, I was just actually going to make a little bit of a divergent comment here, and that is, as exciting as it was to have those three players, and they were all three dynamic, and Sam really carried that team for a long time. But interestingly, they played their best baseball the last month of the year when all three of those guys were gone. Pat really had those guys playing great baseball, and they were making a push to win the second half championship. I swear if they had one more week, I think they might have pulled it off.
Yeah. I'm with you. The second half was great there, and again, it started with those three. I think Braden Montgomery we saw had a little bit of a rough patch, and then he got it going real hot before getting to Birmingham. Sam Antonacci was great all season in Winston before he got there. He got on base at a 425 clip in Winston. It's ridiculous. And then Ryan Galaney, he started the year. We were fans of him last year, and we were excited about seeing what he did this year. Starts the year in Winston and just literally was there for a month and put up a 921 OPS in that month there. Goes to Birmingham and is now going to be back in Birmingham, and then has this awesome face mask on. If people haven't checked that out, you got to check out Ryan Galaney. Had a facial injury and is now rocking this crazy face mask, and I love it. But those three, I think, are the headline on the hitting side. The next two I want, though, to mention on the hitting side, the two guys that have been there all season from just two young pieces we're watching are Gerald Perez and Sammy Zavala. Pretty fun seasons from both these guys. Dylan, you've been higher on Zavala for a while than I have been. What have you seen this season and just the growth from Sammy Zavala?
I mean, the thing that sticks out to me is he's simply just getting his A swing off more. Like, there were a lot of times last year where he was getting beat by high fastballs, and it was every pitch would be fastball at the letters, and he would swing up under it because he's got a very steep uppercutty swing with a big leg kick, and he's getting to those pitches more, and I think that's just a testament to the tools of Zavala, and he came over and was heralded as like, oh, this guy who's going to command a great at bat. And he did. I mean, like a 13.4% walk rate to a 21.4% strikeout rate for a 20-year-old over 490 plate appearances in high A. Like, that is more than fine. And I actually just tweeted something about this right before we hopped on. From June 1st to the end of the year, he had more walks than strikeouts and had a 140 WRC plus. Like, that is unreal from Zavala. And his first 2 months were rough, yeah. But to be able to just flip a switch and turn it around like that, I was really impressed with what I saw from him over the last 3-ish months. And I think that he's sort of elevated himself back into that top 30, maybe even higher than just that 20 to 30 range. I think he could be around that 20 range because a 122 WRC plus over a full season, that's only 2 points lower than Gerald Perez. So I really enjoyed watching Zavala over the last 3 months of the season here. So I'm very impressed by him.
As a guy who goes to a lot of minor league ball games, I've got to remember this turnaround by Zavala this season from what he looked like early in the year, and remember that it is possible that when guys are struggling so much, like he was early in the year, that they can grind away and really turn it around. I mean, his bat to ball skills were excellent the second half of the season. And just unlike what anything at all he looked like early in the year.
No, And that's what happens. I think with these young guys, it's important to remember we got to take the whole season for what it is. And
Right.
we weren't talking about Sammy Zavala much in the earlier part of the season, and he wasn't playing very well, right? So like it's hard for us and for everybody that follows prospects because you have to focus on the results to some extent, and then you have to take a step back and say, okay, let's look at this last month rather than the last 4 months, and let's see the progress he's made because there has been a ton of progress made, and especially the past few months. And then you've got Haral Perez, who kind of just mashes. Like there's still work to be done with Haral Perez, but I'm at the point right now where I think we got to start giving him a little more credit in the prospect world and just in the White Sox realm, because not many 20-year-olds are putting up 24 double, 20 home run, 22 home run seasons. Like that's not a season you're seeing from many guys at that age, and nonetheless, many guys at that age that are like maybe 5'10". Haral Perez doing what he's doing as a small, undersized, probably second base profile, putting up 22 homers as a 20-year-old, there's a lot to like there. And I think that you're going to see a guy, he's going to be 21 and he's going to be in Double-A next season. I don't see any reason why he wouldn't open the season in Birmingham as a 21-year-old infielder. There's a lot of power there, and there's a lot of pull side power. This is a guy you could continue to see. One of my favorite phrases is Aram uses this all the time on the call up is outslug the EVs, right? This is a guy who isn't going to put up the best of metrics, right? You're not going to see him blow you out the way in terms of data, but you're going to see a guy who can tap into his pull side and can elevate the ball at an incredibly, very, very consistent level, and at a high level where you got to be pretty excited about a Haral Perez, in my opinion, when you look at just the power output he's been able to put up at such a young age for an undersized infielder.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think anybody was expecting Haral Perez to go 20 homers, 20 doubles this year. I mean, maybe. I mean, like he's got a ton of pop for a guy who's as small of stature as he is, and for a middle infielder to hit 20 homers as a 20-year-old in high A, like I was really impressed by Haral Perez this year, and it's not like he's selling out for power either. Like it's a strikeout rate of around 21%. And yeah, he's not walking as much as you would want. It's a walk rate of 8.2%, but he's also getting on base at a 315 clip. The OPS number is at a 763, which I think is a bit misleading, and that's probably still above average for the South Atlantic League, because it's a very I don't want to say pitcher dominated league, but like a 763 OPS is pretty good for that. And a thing that I want to mention with Perez, 44.8% fly ball rate. Like he is able to elevate the ball with some of the best in the league. And as he continues to get stronger and fills out, like those are going to turn into homers more frequently than they're not. And if he can, again, just continue to elevate the ball to the pull side, something that we've had an emphasis on this year with Ryan Fuller, there's no telling how many homers he can hit. I mean, is 30 out of the question next year? I probably, because of how cavernous the Birmingham ballpark is. But like, if he gets to Charlotte, oh my God, that's going to be really fun.
Well, I two things. One is one of the things that I like that he did this year is he's hitting the ball to all fields, which just increases his effectiveness. And Elijah, we have talked before about the glut of infielders and the need for some guys to move to the outfield. I suspect if he goes to Birmingham, there's no competition for him at second base, assuming William Bergoya moves on to Charlotte. But man,
Yeah, I don't see Perez as the guy who would move off the infield. I think his profile probably is that second base profile. Even if Bergoya stays there, I think Bergoya would then get shortstop and Antonacci would move up, because I don't see a reason to have Antonacci still in Birmingham next year, honestly. I think after he's in the Arizona Fall League, you're going to see Antonacci in Charlotte next year, which puts you in a position where I think you could have Perez and Bergoya as your middle infield, which that'd be really fun, honestly.
wow.
If Bergoya doesn't move up, I think a duo of 21-year-olds as your middle infield in Birmingham would be really fun next season. So a really impressive season. I think those are the 5 hitters that stand out. Obviously, we mentioned Caleb Bonham earlier in the episode. It was only, what was it, a handful of games, I think 11 games for Bonham to finish out the season, but Caleb Bonham is just he gets to Winston and he puts up a 10-20 OPS in his first 2 weeks at high A at 19 years old. So he'll be in Winston next year. But like, I don't think it's crazy that Bonham could be 20 in Double-A in Birmingham next season at some point if he continues to do what he did this season. I think he's already shown he can handle Winston in 2 weeks, and if he does it for 2 months to start the year next year, he'll be in Birmingham mid next season, which is going to be super fun to watch. But that's most of the hitting side. On the pitching side, we saw a lot of guys either start in Birmingham, in Winston, and then get to Birmingham, or we saw the few guys like Opper, who we talked about earlier, go from Kannapolis to Winston. Who are some of the guys, Dylan? You could start us off here that started in Winston and really just shined through, because there was a number of pitchers that really shined on that roster this year.
I mean, I don't know how I could start with anybody else but Tanner McDougal. I mean, 57 and 2/3 innings in Winston, a 3.28 ERA, a 28.7% strikeout rate. The walk rate was a bit inflated at a 12.6. But I mean, like we were saying earlier, when it comes to pitching prospects who have elevated their stock in the White Sox system this year, it's either 1A or 1B, Tanner McDougal and Christian Opper. And
Yep.
McDougal probably got better after he got the bump to Birmingham just because of how pitcher friendly the Southern League is, but like he was still very good in his about 60 innings in Winston. And then another guy I want to highlight is Mark McLaughlin had a very like sneaky good year for a guy who I wasn't really expecting in Winston this year. 35 and 2/3 innings, a 2.78 ERA, strikeout rate of over 30, walk rate under 7, and then got the bump to Double-A and continued to do more of the same. So like he was a very solid reliever. I think he closed out a couple games for Birmingham down the stretch there. So I think those two. There's obviously more that have gotten the bump up, but like those two were the guys that really impressed me when they started in Winston and then got the bump up to Birmingham.
Yeah, definitely. Shane Murphy too. We didn't even mention Shane Murphy, which is crazy that
He was
Shane
there for
Murphy
like
even
what, like
started.
10 innings?
It's hilarious. Yeah, it's hilarious he started there, because you look at Shane Murphy as a 24-year-old who now has had, been arguably the best pitcher in the system just from purely a stat standpoint this season. Started the season in Winston, made 3 starts there, was effective, and then filled, Birmingham's rotation, had some injury hits. He immediately is the first guy to go up to Birmingham. So barely counts as a Winston guy this season, but was a guy who did start in Winston and is now, just got the bump to Charlotte and looking like he's going to be in the big leagues next year. Who else, Jeff, was on your mind of guys from Winston and the pitching staff that shined through?
Well, there were a lot of relievers that,
Yeah.
Starting with Phil Fox, who I guess is now in Birmingham. So a lot of relievers had some really nice years. I think your bud, the guy you've been promoting a lot, I guess Carson.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really had a strong finish to the season as well. Carson Jacobs.
Yeah, Carson Jacobs had a heck of a season. Carson Jacobs had some ups and downs for sure, but Jacobs, Phil Fox, Dylan mentioned Mark McLaughlin, Nick Altermat is another one to mention there of the bullpen crew. Jonathan Clark had a really strong showing in Winston before getting a bump as well. There's a lot of guys in the bullpen that I think were really fun in Winston. I think, Birmingham is typically where you see bullpen guys kind of take that shift, and generally most players in Birmingham is where you see the next step. So there is a lot of guys that shove in Winston and out of the bullpen at that level and can still kind of just overpower hitters. And then they get to Birmingham, they start to see some of those higher level hitters and they take a step back. So I'm curious to see how those guys play up, because Phil Fox, Carson Jacobs, Mark McLaughlin, those are all guys who I think with next season in Birmingham, we'll see who separates from the pack, because I'm really hoping that at least 1 or 2 of these guys from this Winston bullpen can take a step forward and become those, potential big league bullpen depth guys, right? Another guy to mention, Lucas Gordon too.
Yeah, that's what I was.
Yeah.
That's what was also one of my names. But I was just going to circle back to one of my guys, Phil Fox, a 30% K rate and a 5.7% walk rate. That's a 24.5% strikeout minus walk rate.
Gross.
Like he's not overpowering guys too. Like it's a fastball in the low 90s. But I mean, I've said it time and time again. The fastball, it looks like it's rising because it's coming from such a low arm angle and release point that when he throws it at the top of the rail, you're going to swing under it every single time.
Yeah, 100%. That was excellent. And then, talking about strikeout rate, we just mentioned Carson Jacobs. Carson Jacobs, 80 strikeouts in 54 and 2/3. That's a 30+% strikeout rate there. So definitely some exciting arms. And then Lucas Gordon would be the last starter I'd mention, who now is in Birmingham as well and put up just quality starts, Jeff. I know we've talked about this before, but is it fair to say Lucas Gordon, almost every time he goes out, he's going to give you at least a chance to win a game? Because I feel like he's the type of pitcher in Winston who always felt like that to me.
Well, and he's the guy that you'd say, this guy pitches. I mean, he's not going to overpower you. He knows it. He limits walk. He limits hard contact. That's his game. And this year he was successful doing it. And hopefully, he's going to a league and a ballpark where he should be able to continue to thrive doing that.
Yeah, the one guy who, one bummer with the Winston season is I was expecting this mammoth season from Aldrin Batista this year. Goes down with the injury, comes back, makes a few appearances at the end of the year. So that was one storyline heading into the season. We probably talked about in April how Aldrin Batista was the number one pitcher to watch in that rotation. That we didn't really get to see him this year, unfortunately. I still think I'm very excited to see what Aldrin Batista looks like next year. Even if he stays in Winston, great. If they decide to push him to Birmingham, even with the lack of innings this year, cool. I think he can handle it. But even if he stays in Winston next year, I still think that's a guy who we should be very keyed in on, even with a lost season this year.
Yeah, sometimes these guys get hurt and you kind of forget about them.
Yeah.
McLean, Blake Larson, Aldrin Batista, but they're still very much on the radar.
It happens. It definitely happens. Anybody else you guys got on the top of your head in Winston this season?
I'm all good.
Yeah.
All right. That was pretty good. We're about an hour here. That was great. We got to cover it. Again, not like the seasons that blow you away from either of these teams. But I do think that as a whole, as an organization, as a system, there was a lot of positive notes to take away. And then we'll talk about Birmingham next week, where Birmingham's kind of the culmination of all of this stuff right now. And I think we saw that last year with the current guys at the big league level, and we're seeing it this year with a lot of these guys we talked about from Kannapolis, from Winston, and the guys who started in Birmingham. That team is just kind of the culmination of this young core right now. Then you've got the whole next wave on the way with Bonnemer, Perez, all these other guys, Braden, Billy Carlson, and Jaden Fauske, right? All these other guys on the way from there. But we'll talk about Birmingham next week. I mean, they're playing essentially a meaningless week right now because they've already clinched the playoffs as of last week. They've got 5 more games to play here. And then next Tuesday or Wednesday, I forgot if it's Tuesday or Wednesday, next week is the start of the AA playoffs, where Birmingham will look to repeat as Southern League champions. That will be pretty cool. I don't know. I don't have it on the top of my head, but I don't know the last time a White Sox organization, any minor league affiliate, repeated. If it's been ever, it's been a long time.
Yeah.
So that will be cool to keep an eye on.
There have just been powerhouses for a couple of years now in Birmingham. And
yeah, it's been fun.
It really has been fun. I want to close by a couple of quick comments. One is that I think the White Sox have 2 terrific young managers, Chad Pender and Pat Leland and Winston. They are both just sharp baseball minds, great guys. Personally, they've been great to me. They always make time to talk. I mean, I did an end-of-the-year interview with Chad, and it was on a Sunday night after the last home game. But because the next day was Monday, they were taking an overnight bus trip to Augusta. The bus was literally outside warming up, and he sat down and talked to me for about 10 or 15 minutes. So
that's awesome.
Just really quality guys, super guys. And, I think my last thought is this. The one way, probably more than any other, that you can evaluate the success of a minor league team are the promotions, right? To develop the guys and move them through. Well, Kannapolis had 19 guys promoted last year to Winston. So I think that's a mark of a really successful season.
Yeah, I'm with you there, Jeff. It's really cool. It's awesome to see both Pat and Chad really just taking the reins as younger coaches and guys who have been around baseball. And I think it seems like the players and the people around there really love them. Huge shout out to everyone in Kannapolis and Winston. Obviously, we cover these players and these teams because we're passionate. We love it. We follow the White Sox organization carefully, but there's a ton of great people down there that are putting in the work to make the season go successfully. To everyone, Andrew Murphy and Dan Haloti calling games, all the staff and the office there in Single A and in Kannapolis and Winston. Thank you all for a great season. We will be back next week to talk about the Birmingham Barons and the Charlotte Knights. Talk to you guys then.